Natural Habitat Adventures is pleased to be bringing you this webinar today. We're live from Scotland, and we're here to discover the wild side of Scotland, presented today by Malcolm O'Reilly and Stevie Christie. And before I turn it over to both of them, I'd like to tell you a little bit about each. First, I'd like to tell you about Malcolm. Malcolm's passion for the natural world began early. As a child, he reveled in the escapades in the local countryside in the company of his many pets and a bedroom full of bones, fossils, feathers, and old birds' nests. Malcolm went on to complete a degree with honors in animal biology at Bangor University in North Wales, where he studied octopi, learned to climb and ski in the mountains, and took up kayaking on the Welsh West Coast, which led to a job teaching adventure sports and field studies on the Isle of Arran. Since then, Malcolm has built a career as an outdoor education instructor and wildlife guide, working as a seasonal ranger in the famous Abernethy Forest Reserve. So that's Malcolm, and you'll be hearing from him today. You'll also be hearing from Stevie Christie, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about Stevie. Stevie loves adventures in the outdoors, so he thinks he has the best job in the world. Having spent countless days exploring Scotland's wild and not so wild places on foot, by bike, by kayak, canoe, on skis, and by car, he feels he knows his way around Scotland better than most people. Stevie has climbed most of Scotland's mountains and gave up counting how many islands he's visited. He also has his black book of top hotels and special accommodations around the country. While he used to spend most of his time guiding, he now gets creative in the office, designing itineraries and adventures for all kinds of clients. And he feels it's a privilege to be able to design an experience which creates a meaningful impact on people and which leaves them with special memories. And we hope to leave all of you with some memories and inspiration today, and perhaps motivation to travel to Scotland yourself and meet them firsthand. So here they are, Malcolm and Stevie. Welcome.
Hi there, guys. Hello. Welcome we're broadcasting from the Cairngorms National Park in the very centre of the Scottish Highlands. So Malcolm and I are just going to talk you through a little bit about our itinerary today. And the trip that you could enjoy with NatHab if you so choose. And hopefully along the way you're going to learn a little bit about Scotland and its wildlife. So it's really a bit of a journey around the country. You should be able to see a map in front of you now. We'll be starting down in Edinburgh, which is at the bottom right of the country. And we'll be journeying west, heading towards the Isle of Mull, which is just slightly further north than Edinburgh, but on the west coast. And from there, taking a northward pass through Skye up to the Western Isles, also known as the Outer Hebrides. You'll see them marked at the top left. And then moving back east towards Inverness, and then south past Aviemore, which is close to where we are based at the moment, and south back down to Edinburgh. And then for those of you who might be interested in the extension to the trip, that's right up at the very top of the screen, the Orkney Isles. So along the way, wildlife aside, you're going to see some wonderful scenery. I guess Scotland's well known for mountains, for forests, for maybe less so for beaches, but that's something that, especially on the west coast, we have some incredible beaches, and of course lots of great habitats for wildlife, such as the puffin here. Journeying around, it's very much part of Scotland's history that you'll experience. Everywhere you go, there are ruined castles or ruined buildings, old cottages and crofts, I guess all telling a story of life in the Highlands in days gone by. And we feel that any journey to Scotland, whether you're here to see wildlife, to hike up mountains, or just here to tour, very much getting into the history of Scotland and its culture is something that definitely is part of every journey. And you may have noticed there's not been any rain in any of the photographs so far, so we do have a very variable climate in Scotland, but one of the benefits of that is that it does bring some incredible light conditions, as you can see from that last image there. So just to give you an idea of how we're going to work, Malcolm and I are going to present together. I'll generally just talk through the daily activities that you would enjoy in this tour, and Malcolm will come in and assist with some insights into some of the wildlife that we'll encounter, and some information about that. So the tour begins in Scotland's capital city of Edinburgh. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and we spend our first 2 nights in a very nice 4-star hotel just outside the city centre, in an area called Bruntsfield, which is, people often describe Edinburgh as a city of villages, and Bruntsfield's a very lovely part of town, opposite a large park and just close to the castle as well. So while we're in Edinburgh, there's an opportunity for those of you arriving a little bit early to explore the Old Town, which is, I guess, the most famous part of the city, and indeed have a private tour of Edinburgh Castle, which you can just about make out on the skyline there, just to the left of the clock tower.
There's plenty of wildlife in Edinburgh city centre as well.
There is, although we tend to try and avoid most of that, but it's good fun on the right occasion. So our first real wildlife, well, actually we'll have a few more images of town, very historic buildings and structures. Edinburgh's often called the Athens of the North, but it's got these lovely colourful streets, great fun for exploring, and everything's very compact. It's a lovely city to just walk around as well and explore on foot. But our first experience of wildlife will be on the second day of the trip, when we make a day trip out of Edinburgh. And surprising to a lot of people, just very close by to Edinburgh, we have really one of the top centres for wildlife in Scotland. It's a place called Bass Rock, which you can see in this image here, and you can certainly see all the top of it's sort of white, and you may be able to make out the dots, and that's basically a massive colony of gannets. There are around about 150,000 gannets on this rock, and we'll be taking a boat trip out to the island to have a look around. Visiting this location is somewhere that David Attenborough described as one of his top 10 wildlife experiences anywhere in the world. So it's a pretty powerful place to start the trip.
I'm really delighted to have the Scottish Seabird Centre as part of this itinerary, and that's pretty much our first port of call on this day, and it's through them that we managed to get up close and personal to all these gannets. And I think probably that's one of the strengths for me as a biologist, and for the guests that we had on these trips in the past. That's one of the strengths of this itinerary, is it really showcases just the incredible seabird colonies and life around the shores of the British Isles, and specifically Scotland and the islands. It's some of the best habitats, shore and island habitats in the world.
Yep, and it's probably worth pointing out as well that this is not very far offshore. It's maybe 20 minutes or so.
Oh, it's very, very close. Yeah, it's a lovely wee jaunt. They've actually got a purpose-built brand new boat that they usually take us out on. It's a catamaran, so it's a specially designed double-hulled boat, which is very, very stable and very, very comfortable.
Yeah, so that's I guess a great place to start the trip. But for much of the trip we're going to be in the Scottish Highlands, and on day 3 we'll be heading north and west towards the west coast. But on the way we stop at a little town called Doon and visit a rather interesting project there, which is a red kite centre, which is basically a farmland that's been diversified to encourage the red kites back to the area.
And many folks that I've had the pleasure of guiding around on this trip and out to Doon, many folks have been absolutely captivated by these red kites. They're not an enormous bird of prey. They're appreciably smaller than your bald eagle, for example, but they do have massive wings for their body size. And as far as I'm concerned, they're one of our most beautiful birds of prey. They've got quite a story to learn about them as well.
So that's a nice place to break our journey west, which is probably a couple of hours. But then we get to our base on the west coast, and we stay at this lovely hotel for 4 nights. They say they've got the best view on the west coast, and I guess the key part of the view is actually just out of the out of the shot. So we like to keep a little thing in surprise for you. But all of the rooms have got incredible sea views, and a lovely place to dine as well. So our next trip, we're going to be heading out to explore some more of Scotland's islands, and you can see that there are many different islands off Scotland's west coast. Typically, the screen in front of you, actually, I'll jump forward a slide because I think we've, oops, yeah. We typically head out with this chap first of all on day 4. This is a very interesting boat cruise. We have this catamaran taken privately, of course, and it's a lovely place to experience. You'll see the top of the Sea Eagle. Also a lot of marine life, so it's a reasonably good area to spot minke whales, basking sharks, which are the second largest fish in the ocean, and things like porpoises and dolphins. But one of the highlights as well is the animals is the seascape, and in particular the Corrie of Wrekin whirlpool, which is in the lowest slide there. This is the third largest whirlpool in the world, and clearly we'll be going in when it's at slack water, so it's perfectly safe to do so. But even at that, it's an incredible, powerful thing to see and experience.
It's my goodness, I've had some fantastic cruises through there. Lindsay is the boat skipper, and I was just, as I was listening to Stevie there, it was just occurring to me that I think if you have the opportunity to come and join us in the Highlands and Islands this year, you'll find that some of the strengths of the experience are the stories that you'll hear. You know, it's stories to do with the landscape, it's stories to do with whirlpools, stories to do with the wildlife, the people that used to live there, that may be people that really lived there, or it might be characters from legend, and it's just an extraordinary backdrop of stories to get your head into.
It is, yeah. It's probably quite different from many other wildlife destinations. The largest creature we might see would be a whale or perhaps a basking shark, like in the top right image here. But despite lacking, I guess, real megafauna, it's, as Malcolm says, it's very much the landscape and everything that goes along with that that really pulls the destination together.
If I may just quickly jump in as well. One of the strengths of the itinerary, in my mind, is because we visit several different islands, both east and west coast. That gives us a huge amount of time in the good habitats, i.e. at sea, to see more seabirds, and gives us chances of seeing things like dolphins and basking sharks. You know, so simply island hopping is just a great way to increase our chances of seeing some awesome wildlife.
Yeah. So then on the 5th day, we'll head out on the ocean again, and we'll head. It's a short crossing from Oban across to the Isle of Mull. And we'll spend a little bit of time in Mull, but really one of the highlights for today is getting up to the tiny island of Staffa, which, if you look at the map at the top right there, almost right in the middle of the screen, just below the island of Ulva, you can see the tiny little dot of Staffa. And then the two images at the bottom of the screen are of Staffa, and the cave you see there is Fingal's Cave, which apparently inspired Mendelssohn to write his Hebridean Overture. And that's part of the same geology that's linked to the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. But an incredible day. Mull is definitely one of Scotland's wildlife centres, and as Malcolm said, just getting out to these smaller islands, the birds you'll see there are fantastic. Puffins are common there from May through to July.
Certainly, puffin is one of the star species that many people come from all over the world to Scotland to try and see. The good news is these times of year they're not that hard to see at all, and they're very approachable, either on the sea, or if we should have the opportunity on Staffa to walk up onto the top of the island and get close to some of these little beasts. They're like little clowns, and they're absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. There we go. And then on the next day, we're on now day 6. We leave the the West Highlands, if you like, and travel further north. We're heading towards the Outer Hebrides or Western Isles, but it's an incredible journey to get us there. So we drive up across the Isle of Skye, which is, you can see this wonderful image here. This landscape here is quite close to where we then take the ferry from Skye across to the Isle of Harris, which is probably the centremost island in the Outer Hebrides. And our hotel is right there in the centre of town. I say town quite liberally. Tarbert's population is probably about 500 people, something like that.
On a weekend.
Yeah, which actually makes it a relatively big place for the islands. But Harris is a fantastic place to go and explore, and we're lucky enough to have 3 nights on these lovely islands. The landscape here often surprises people. I think white sandy beaches and turquoise seas are not really what people have in mind when they think of coming to the Scottish Highlands and Islands, but it's definitely what Harris in particular has in abundance. The water is definitely a bit cooler than similarly turquoise seas you may have visited in the past. It's probably around about 13 centigrade, so that's maybe low 50s Fahrenheit, so quite cool, but the brave might, or brave Scottish people might go in for a dip.
It's not been unknown for me to suggest clients to walk bare feet on the beach. You'll see one of the photos there's got walking boot footprints. I thoroughly recommend exfoliating on Harris's beach.
Definitely. But amazing landscape to go and explore and discover, and wonderful wildlife. I guess because there's so few people on the islands, really, it's got a great population. For example, this golden eagle here, but many other species on land. It's a great place for red deer and many bird life. But really, I guess we're right on the fringe of Europe, really. So it's the Atlantic that holds much of the appeal for wildlife. And one of the highlights for us is a trip out to St Kilda, which is a tiny archipelago about 60 miles off the coast of Harris going west. And we take this boat out. It's not an easy day. I'm sure Malcolm would testify. It's you're at sea for maybe 3.5 hours each way. And the seas, you're in the open Atlantic, so it can be rough. It's not for everyone. I think I'd be pretty clear in saying that. But for those of you that make it there, and it's worth noting as well, the conditions obviously don't always allow that we do get there. But yeah, for those of you that make it there, it's an incredible place to visit. I'm sure Malcolm's got a few thoughts on it.
Yeah, certainly. It's been described to me by one of the boat drivers out there as one of the most spectacular boat journeys in Europe, easily. I mentioned stories before, and St Kilda's it's a dual World Heritage Site. There's not many dual World Heritage Sites in the world, but St Kilda's one of them. And that's one for its seabird colonies and wildlife, and another World Heritage designation is for its cultural history, which you'll hopefully hear more about. It's a really fascinating story about human habitation on the edge of inhabited Europe, and there's a lot of work been done there to conserve the remains of the settlements there, and it's an absolutely spectacular place. It is hard to get to, but that adds to its appeal. If you're happy on boats and you don't mind a long day, if we get the weather, I'd thoroughly recommend it. And if not, that's fine, because there's tons to see and do on the main island as well.
Yeah, there's no permanent population on the island now. It was abandoned in 1930, but there's obviously still quite a lot of remains. And just the landscape, the cliffs, the noise of the seabirds, everything is just quite overwhelming. As Malcolm said, it's got that double UNESCO World Heritage Site status. I think Machu Picchu in Peru also has that, but there's very few others. But it's that kind of level of place, somewhere that really will impact you if you're lucky enough to make it there. But as Malcolm said as well, there's much more to the Outer Hebrides than St Kilda, and great for wildlife. You can see the sign there for the otters, and we'll spend the following day just really exploring the landscape of Harris and That's everything from its beaches to what we would call the Machair, which are sort of flower meadows right on the coast, but also meeting some people, such as this Harris Tweed weaver, so we can pop in and meet some local people and find out about life on the islands today, which is, as we said earlier, a great part of any journey through the islands. And then our last place that we'll visit on the Hebrides is actually the Isle of Lewis, which is connected to the Isle of Harris by a natural causeway. But these are very famous standing stones, the Callanish standing stones. And one of my favourite things about exploring in Scotland is that when you come to sites like this, these stones are 5,000 years old, something like that. But they're not fenced off. You can walk right up to them, you can lay your hand against them, or you can sit down in the centre of them and have a moment. It's really up to you. That they do get a reasonable number of visitors, but not nearly enough to need to fence them off and keep people back. So you can very much get up close and personal with Scotland's cultural heritage. But after we've been to the stones, we leave the islands and take a ferry back from the town of Stornoway back to Ullapool on the west coast, and then transfer down to our next hotel. Our final hotel for the last couple of nights is this place, Cool House, lovely grand old building, sort of in the north of Scotland. And then moving back over onto the east coast, we spend our 10th day in Scotland. Quite a contrasting day really, but we go and explore an area called the Black Isle, which despite being called an isle, it is not an island. But that's very well known for its marine life once again. In particular, it's this pod of dolphins that are often seen just off Channery Point on the easternmost tip.
Yeah, it's beautiful. The Black Isle is one of my favourite spots, and this group of dolphins, they're extensively studied by scientists based in Aberdeen University, and they're actually very, very well known to be the largest bottlenose dolphins in the world. So by body weight, they're the largest bottlenose dolphins in the world, and they're resident along the Aberdeenshire coast and the Black Isle. Exceptionally good views. Often, that sounds like a promise, it nearly is, but we're taking a great little boat out to see them up close and personal as well.
And then coming back from the dolphins, we then take a short hike down to see a waterfall. It's called Rogie Falls, and this is fairly typical Scottish forest, this ancient Caledonian pine forest. And this waterfall, as well as being sort of very scenic to look at, it's in a great spot. It's also a good place to spy salmon trying to leap up the falls and make their way back to spawn. Particularly good with the sort of later season, so maybe the June trip or the July date was probably the best chance of seeing the salmon leaping. But for those of you that come at that time of year and are lucky enough to see them, it's a great experience to stand on the bridge and watch one of nature's great battles as it pans out.
You might be able to catch one.
Exactly. There's no grizzlies on the waterfalls on this trip, but maybe a few fishermen downstream.
There's certainly some world famous salmon fishing rivers that we encounter on this trip, and that's one of the main ones.
Yeah, definitely. So then I guess our last full day in Scotland is we go and visit this estate just west of Inverness. It's called the Agas Field Centre. Lovely old baronial building, and we'll go there and we'll meet the renowned Scottish naturalist Sir John Lister Kay, and Sir John will welcome us into what's the family home and talk to us a wee bit about the studies they've been doing over the past I don't know how many years.
Oh crumbs! I mean,
long time.
Sir John Lister Kay actually was one of, if not the first person to put together essentially wildlife tourism in Scotland, if not Britain. So he's got a wealth of experience there, and plenty of stories again to tell.
While we're there, we'll have the opportunity to go down to one of their hides in the evening as well. Previously they've had beaver there, but I believe that they're on their way out, so we're going to hopefully spy some badgers and pine marten, as well as a lot of bird life. obviously this will be forest bird species rather than coastal species.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just out of interest, the beaver project there at Aegis was one of the first beaver projects really to be set up in Britain. Beavers are native to Britain, but they were long extinct, so very comparatively recently, 1 or 2 small projects were set up to see about reintroducing them, and that project at Aegis simply reached its conclusion, and further projects have been spawned because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the slides you're seeing now, just a selection of photos. You'll see we'll have some opportunity to see some nocturnal wildlife. Again, Britain's not well known for its megafauna in the sense of we don't have herds of wildebeest or herds of buffalo or brown bears all over the place. But many of our wildlife are, I would say, quite engaging, should we say. The bottom picture is pine martens. They were nearly extinct in Britain. They're now making quite a comeback, and they're one of the most sought after, most entertaining, I would say, small predators that we have. You'll see a badger up there as well, inspired for the story of Wind in the Willows, and we'll have a chance to see some of these smaller but very engaging creatures at Aegis.
Yeah, and certainly when you're in the heights, you get pretty good views. You're up reasonably close to these animals, but it's also worth noting that the clients in the small picture there, they've all got binoculars, and it's definitely, if you want to get the most out of a wildlife trip to Scotland, then you really need to bring a good pair of binoculars with you to help you identify some of the species that are perhaps not quite as close.
Yeah, feel free to ask us in the questions afterwards. Certainly got some good suggestions for equipment and clothing to bring.
Yeah, and that's just a red deer shot. The red deer are really all over Scotland, the biggest land mammal and a very iconic species for the Scottish Highlands. So that's the sort of the main tour. But for those of you that want to extend their time in Scotland, there's the opportunity to come a little bit further north and explore the Orkney Islands, which are really contrasting, I guess, to the mainland of Scotland, very dominated by Norse culture. So the people that live there are Orcadian. They would be Orcadian first and Scottish second, but there's very strong links, as I said, to the Norse heritage. So one of the most famous sites is this sea stack, the Old Man of Hoy in the left-hand image there, which was climbed by Sir Chris Bonington and others in a live 2D television broadcast, and I think it was 1968 or something, 69. It's about 106 meters high, but
you'll be pleased to know we're not climbing it.
Not in this trip, no. But a lovely landscape to explore.
Again, Orkney for me is just as much about the stories of the people and the landscape as it is about the wildlife there. There are some species of raptor, birds of prey, and also sea mammals, which are exceptionally sought after around Orkney.
And this is a fairly typical landscape for the Orkney Islands you'll be looking at here. It's kind of flat and rolling and quite a lot of farmland there. Very few trees because of the fairly prevalent wind. But again, lots of incredible heritage, such as this is the Ring of Brodgar, so another standing stone circle. And you can see from the image that there's obviously, again, there's no fences. You can get up and just walk around the stones at your own leisure. So very sort of powerful place to go and visit.
When you remember that many of these standing stone monuments that Stevie's shown you predate the pyramids, some of these, or they're at least contemporary with the pyramids, just exceptionally old. And again, there's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, if I remember rightly, on Orkney, which is this cluster of 3 Stone Age sites, which is exceptionally important in world terms.
Yeah, and our base in Orkney is a nice traditional hotel on the waterfront. Orkney is a collection of over 70 small islands. Many of them are now linked by causeways, and our hotel is actually on the island of Bury, but linked by a causeway, and as you can see, right next to the ocean, and you'd expect some fresh seafood to appear on the menu, I would imagine. So yeah, very much as we were saying there, there's just a huge amount of human history there. This is the village of Scarabray, which is the main one. This was, I think it's a Stone Age village, isn't it?
Yeah.
And was lay hidden in the sand dunes for, I guess, thousands of years until it was basically a storm uncovered it, and fairly recently, I'm not sure quite how long ago it was.
19th century.
Yeah, but it's an incredible place to visit and remarkably well preserved to walk around. But as you're walking around these villages, there's a constant sound of seabirds, so you're never far from wildlife on these islands. Some more images. It's kind of hard to contrast or to quite put down the difference between Orkney and the rest of Scotland, but particularly for those of you that spend time in the Outer Hebrides as part of the main trip, a lot of people would expect that more other islands in Scotland, such as Orkney, would be very similar, but the Outer Hebrides Islands are influenced by Gaelic culture as opposed to the Norse culture of Orkney. So the people are different. They speak with a different accent. Believe it or not, we actually find people from Orkney quite difficult to understand sometimes. But the landscape's different. The wildlife, a lot of the species, I guess, are reasonably similar that you would expect to see up there. But
even the seals seem to have a different accent.
Yeah, we did have we had a walrus there last year.
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
you would not expect to see a walrus on the tour, but a walrus popped up. It was there for about a week, I think, in one of the islands, North Romsey.
Yeah. That's one of the amazing things for me as a biologist in the Scottish Highlands and Islands is it's often it seems to be on the flyway for many migrating species and also marine animals. So creatures first make landfall as they're traveling between Europe and Scandinavia or even the Americas. And so it's almost, it's worth expecting the unexpected as we travel around.
Yeah, this is a lovely aerial shot of some of the southern islands, which are all linked by these causeways. And they're great places, great fun driving across, because there was actually a large fleet of German ships was sunk here in the war, and a lot of them are still, the wrecks are still can be seen protruding through the sea. And then you've got the likes of the Italian Chapel, which is this building on the bottom left, which is essentially a Nissan hut, which was converted by Italian prisoners of war into, it's really a fascinating place to go inside. Very simple, but incredibly ornately decorated inside, and a real special place to go and visit.
I find for me that running this trip is it's almost like being in a time machine. We start off in Edinburgh, and very much sort of the modern world, if you like, and we end up going across into Stone Age sites, and then we skip across to World War II history, and then Victorian history, and it's as I say, it's just as much about the landscapes and the people as it is the creatures and the plants.
Yeah, very much so. And the plants is something we've not really talked about today, but definitely, I guess any time of year, but May and June are wonderful for a lot of the wildflowers. It does depend on how the season's going in terms of when summer chooses to arrive in Scotland. But yeah, it's very much the small flora and fauna as well as the larger species combined with the history and the cultural heritage and the people that really make this such a all-inclusive journey through Scotland. And it all ends, I guess, back in the town of Kirkwall, which is the main village in Orkney. Lovely harbour, and a great wee town to explore on foot. It's got old cathedrals and flagstone streets. A nice place to pick up a couple of souvenirs for before you head home. And even heading home, the journey begins in Kirkwall Airport, a tiny wee airport, not much more than a strip, but again the flight out of there and then down the east coast of Scotland is a highlight for many as well, and that takes you back into Edinburgh really just in time to connect with your own flight home, and unless you're choosing to extend your time here. We've got a great team of guides lined up to take you around Scotland this summer. Graham, Malcolm in the middle there, and then Tim on the right hand side, all really passionate about wildlife and really know their way around Scotland, so you'll be in really safe hands if you come across and join these guys. And that's really the end of our presentation today, so we will sit back and see what questions you've typed up and thrown at us and move on to that section.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. We're all inspired. We're ready to go. And there's a question here about the differences, mostly weather-wise, between the May, June, and July trips. Are there any distinct differences in those months?
Sometimes. I guess weather in Scotland, I mean, people, if they're coming for, I guess I would start by saying very few people come for the weather. But it would usually end up being more of a positive surprise to them that it's probably not as rainy as people would suggest. So that usually is a bit of a bonus. Statistically, May and June would be slightly drier than July, but having said that, you might come in May and it might rain 4 or 5 days, and you might come in July and it could be dry for the entire trip. Typically, we would say just come and expect a mix of weather. You will get days of showers. You might have some days where it's windier or sunshine or cooler or warmer. But I mean, if you're trying to pick a date based on weather, it's really a lucky dip because, yeah, May can be glorious or it can be a wee bit cold. And that would go for June or July as well, really. I don't have a favourite. I quite often take my trips in, well, any time in that period. Early summer for me is the best time to come to Scotland, so that's May through July. It works anyway.
Yeah, be prepared for anything, I would say, and that's coming from two professionals who've been doing it all their careers. Yeah, the weather is famously changeable, anywhere from apocalyptically bad to absolutely amazing, and that's no exaggeration. I look back over the last few seasons, and actually we've had quite a few really good days, actually, and that's often because we're right on the coast or on the islands, and actually the bad weather ends up further inland.
Okay. Well, and I just saw this question. Someone was asking about later in the year, September, October. Do you find that the same sort of formula, if you will, applies to those dates as well?
Yeah, I mean it's a lovely time to come, particularly for like if you want to see Scotland's famous purple heather. September's a fantastic time to come for that, especially in the area in the Cairngorms National Park where we are just now. But yeah, we can get what we call an Indian summer where you might get a lovely warm week in September, less so in October. In October you would definitely be expecting for the temperatures to be a bit cooler. We would start getting overnight frosts potentially, and there is always the risk or perhaps opportunity of seeing a big storm sweep in for a couple of days at that time of year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, we have someone listening who is very interested in photographing the wildlife and wondering, do you get close enough that you can get the photos without a tripod, or do you need to bring one of those with you?
Potentially, if you're interested in taking some photos of Highland coos, if you're familiar with what I'm talking about, these gigantic, very ancient breed actually. It's a ginger, very long furred cow. It's a domestic cow, but with huge big horns. They're an absolutely iconic sort of Scottish domesticated animal. They can come right up to the van potentially. We've been stopped in the road by them before. Red deer can be very approachable as well. Yeah, so I would suggest if you've got a camera, you're going to bring an SLR, for example. You may want a beanbag or two if you want to shoot from the van. Obviously, we encourage guests to just consider other guests when we're taking photographic opportunities. But as much as possible, we'll try and get you some good shots. I usually bring a telescope with a tripod just for longer views. But many of our opportunities can be had at the roadside or after a short walk. So if you have a tripod, it can be really convenient. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think it does. Yes, thank you. Then there was a question about best time to travel if one wanted to see puffins. Is there a puffin season?
No, I mean, on the first trip in May, the puffins are definitely, I mean, they're well on to the colonies by then. You know, they're coming in, they spend the winter at sea, and by May, certainly they're well into setting up their territories. They live in rabbit burrows, of all places, so they're well on the job then. And then by July, yeah, it's not long until the young are starting to fledge then. So it's just right. I wouldn't leave it longer than July, put it that way.
All right, thank you. We have several people keen to see the Northern Lights. Is there a trip that they could take towards the end of September that would, or would they have opportunities in the fall to see Northern Lights?
Yeah, better in the fall, certainly. Yeah, we haven't dwelt on it much during our talk, but the day length changes a lot through the year in northern Scotland. So in the summer there's quite long periods of daylight. But yeah, the longer you leave it into the autumn, the better.
Yeah, we're further north in Scotland than Edmonton in Canada, if you're familiar where that is. So pretty far north, and as Malcolm says, if you're in the Highlands in the middle of June, then you're going to get daylight after 11 p.m. So really to see, and well, it really doesn't get all that dark, to be honest, overnight. So therefore to actually see the Northern Lights in the summertime is pretty difficult. We were just talking before we came on air tonight that there's a warning or alert out tonight that we might be able to see them, although it's looking a little bit cloudy outside. So probably best to say, yeah, certainly late September into October, or come in the winter time if Northern Lights is what you want to see. But it's very hit or miss. You can't really judge whether you're going to see them or not. You need to have that lucky combination of clear skies and some activity.
And lots of coffee.
Yeah.
Good point. Okay. You talked a little bit about sometimes rough seas. There was a question about whether you have any recommendations for motion sickness.
Yeah, yes, stay ashore, says Stevie. Thanks for that. We've got recommendations as long as our arm. Gosh, okay, so people in the past have used travel bands, if you know those, these elasticated bands that work on acupressure on the wrists. They're very inexpensive and seem to be very good for some people. There's often we'll know drugs by one name, but you'll have a different name for them. But there's several tablets which are non-prescription in Britain and relatively easy to get hold of, which you would take the night before or a few hours before you go on the sea, and they might cause a little bit of drowsiness, but they seem to be very good for some people. Ginger, chewing crystallized ginger is a really good sea kayaker's trick. So if you've got a sweet tooth, that can be very effective. And then if you want the heavy stuff, then we have something called, well, Stugaron is another drug, and patches can work very well. I can't remember the name of the drug that's in the patches, but I'm sure your medics will be able to tell you. But patches that stick on your skin behind your ear, they can be very effective, and people have had good results with those in the past. Yeah. They're prescription drugs, those ones.
It's probably worth just highlighting as well that although there's quite a few boat trips in the programme, most of them are relatively short. Probably 2 to 3 hours would be normal.
Yeah.
And again, and a lot of them in waters that you wouldn't expect to be too rough. St Kilda is the obvious exception to that.
Yeah.
And getting out to staff as well can be a little bit. Yeah, there's a bit of motion there because again you're on the west coast of Mull, so you have the swell from the Atlantic coming in there. But obviously the skippers would make a decision whether if the sea was going to be particularly rough, they would simply take us somewhere else that it's going to be more more fun to visit.
That's right. I mean, not to labour it too much, but I think Natural Habitat Adventures have made the dates for these trips such that we tend not to encounter huge storms. Really, it's much more of an autumn and winter thing. So travelling to the big islands, the transfers are on big roll-on, roll-off ferries that give very good views out to sea. often encountering dolphin pods, and they're very stable. It's just the smaller boats that occasionally might be a little bit more lumpy.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the Isle of Lewis, and there was a question about what there is to witness there.
Yeah, Lewis is actually the biggest island on the archipelago of the Western Isles. The thing I love about the Western Isles is, we visit the Isle of Harris in the middle and then go up to Lewis, and they're both quite contrasting. Harris is very mountainous and Lewis is quite low-lying. They're referred to as islands, but as Steve said, they are connected. Some of the most ancient Neolithic Stone Age sites are on Lewis, and again there's very good populations of sea eagle and golden eagle and hen harrier on Lewis. And if you're into sort of human culture again, there's lots of peat diggings, especially on Lewis. So we'll definitely spend time getting our heads around how peat digging works for the locals there. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Stevie.
Yeah, it's just, I guess, I agree with Malcolm. The islands are contrasting in their landscape, and while Lewis can at first seem a little bit bleak to a lot of people, that sort of becomes its charm in the end. And as well as the various things that Malcolm mentioned, its whole west coast is fringed with enormous white sand beaches with big rollers coming in from the Atlantic. And for those of you that enjoy beach walks, it's a really hard to beat.
Okay, good. I think we have time. No,
sorry to interrupt. We need to make sure we've got Harris Tweed on the it is on the itinerary, but let's make sure we mention it. If you've not heard of Harris Tweed cloth, then make sure you have a little look at that, because that's a really important part of our journey.
Oh, good. Thank you for that tip. So I think we have one last question that I'll ask, and then we'll wrap it up. There's a question about whether the trips include much hiking inland for viewing wildlife or just scenic vistas.
Okay. Yeah, there's plenty of opportunities for a leg stretch, as I refer to them. Equally, if you are, we prefer to take things easy, then because we have vehicles on hand, there's a chance to stay in the van and just view from the road. As I say, with journeys in boats, obviously you don't need to walk too much unless we go ashore. The paths, any walks we do, we'll usually keep to around about at most 1, maybe 2 miles. Some of the paths are very easy, very well maintained, gentle paths, and go very slowly, looking and listening as we go. We're not really in a hurry to get anywhere generally. There are 1 or 2 routes where it can be quite challenging in places, but I think one of the things I'm proud of with this itinerary is that the guides are exceptionally good at looking after you and staying close to you and helping you if you're finding it a wee challenge on rougher terrain. So I will mention the island of Staffa. That's where you can get good views of Puffin on land, and that's where Fingal's Cave is. Usually the boat driver will give you an opportunity to land on Staffa, and we'll give you as much help as you need to explore that, or you can just stay on the boat and get excellent views from the boat.
Excellent, thank you. All right, well, that covers all of the questions that we had, so I am going to turn it over to you for some closing comments.
Yeah, well, we hope you found our little journey around Scotland enough of a taste to maybe whet your appetite to want to come over and see it for yourself. Hopefully you've got the flavour that while Scotland is definitely one of the prime centres in Europe for wildlife watching, it does, as a package, it comes with a lot more than just the wildlife. It is the human history and culture and the people, as well as the landscapes and just the journey around the whole country that makes this trip, I would think, be pretty special. I've been lucky enough to I've travelled around the world on several trips and safaris and been to South America and had all sorts of wonderful wildlife encounters, but For me, the trip in Scotland it's a match for any of those. It's uniquely different because of the other aspects it all brings in. Thoughts, Malcolm?
I think for me again, I just love working here in Scotland and the Highlands and Islands. And for me, the bottom line has to be just variety, just on almost every level you look at it. There's a huge amount of variety here. Just one thing comes to mind. If you're particularly interested in the wildlife, I would very strongly recommend that you bring binoculars with you. That can make the most of our time out in the field. Most folks would recommend 8 by 42 size. Many people get a lot of pleasure from bringing their cameras with them, either compact or SLR. It's probably worth just familiarizing yourself with the different modes, just because things can show up at different distances, and yeah, that's definitely worth doing. And yeah, bring plenty of layers as well, clothing-wise. Again, the weather can be bewilderingly quick to change, from bright hot sun in the morning to breezy and overcast, and then back again. So bring your hat and gloves and your sun cream as well.
Yep, and I guess just finally, just thanks to everyone for tuning in from around North America and perhaps further afield as well. It's getting late here now in Scotland. It's about 8 p.m. so it's dark and getting a little bit cooler outside as well. So it's almost time for us to sign off and head towards our bed. But yeah, thanks for listening to us, and hopefully it's inspired you to come and see us sometime.
Well, thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Stevie. It was great to be with you today, and we hope that you see some of those northern lights tonight. We'll be looking for them as well in our parts of the states. And with that, we will say good evening and conclude our webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Bye.